So let's start. Let's start. Shall we? Let's look at what Human Rights Watch did. Okay. Let's go down. Uh, so I think one thing that people usually leave out is the methodology. So I want to look into that. But this is an interesting chart that's right at the beginning of Israel's. Human Rights Watch's report on Israel. It says water access in Gaza. Comparison of liters per person per day. (LPPD) in Israel, 247 liters per person per day. The WHO minimum to meet basic needs, 50 to 100 liters per what was it? Liters per person per day. The LPPD. Oh hey, Iconoclast, how are you? In Gaza, before the current hostilities, it was 83 LPPD. Right, so within minimum requirements, but lower than in Israel. Like Israel is like a lot bigger. In Gaza, since the current hostilities, October 2023 onwards, 2 to 9 LPPD. So way like 10 times less than the WHO minimum to meet basic needs. And I find it interesting. Oh hey, just one person out there. I really like that I can see your badges now. It really informs me better about who's talking. Um, I hope to see a lot of worlds on fire. Again, since more people are joining, I will show you the badges in a higher resolution in a minute as more people arrive. Okay, but yeah, this is an interesting chart that um, Human Rights Watch includes right at the beginning, right at the start. It says people live with less than a full daily water container for drinking, cooking, and personal washing. So that's kind of crazy, right? You live with like less than 10 liters per day. The minimum water supply established by Sphere is 15 LPPD from 1.5 to 7 times Gaza's actual water access range. It's kind of crazy. So I know that Kogat, the Israeli agency, is now trying to push back on these claims. But honestly, Kogat is the entity that says that there's no problem with aid going into Gaza because they have a. I got an email because they have like a minimum per person amount of calories going into Gaza, and so there's enough calories going into Gaza for the people that live in Gaza, and they sort of just forget that once they go in, they need to distribute it. And yes, sure, there's the argument that they have that like Hamas steals the aid. Okay, even if that were the case, then you sort of have a duty to protect that aid. And what we have been seeing is not so much instances of like, I don't know, World Central Kitchen saying, oh my god, Hamas stole our truck, but oh my god, Israel bombarded my trucks twice now. Right? One made a scene, the other one was normalized. So I mean, take what they're saying with a grain of salt, but we can look into that later. We can check their tweets in a second, right? Um, okay, so how many liters do we use for brushing our teeth with faucet off? Wow. Okay. This is ridiculous. Like, just brushing your teeth, drinking your minimum 3 liters of water a day, and hand washing for 30 seconds is what they have. Oh, hey, Boulevard Dreams, how are you? Um, Talking about water here. So, I just want to go to the methodology section because I think it's important. Where's the methodology section? Did I skip the methodology section already? I shouldn't have. Okay, there you go. Oh yeah, page 40. Iconoclast says, speaking of protecting aid, given that the civil part of Hamas is pretty much incapable of conducting protection police work, on whom does the task of protecting aid fall? Kogat? It falls on the occupier, right? When a state occupies territory, they become responsible for the well-being of the population. This is one thing that Israel does not seem to understand. Since it is since it retains effective control over Gaza, it is occupying Gaza in all the respects in which it can maintain that effective control. And so what Israel did in response is it just moved its forces outside of the occupation zone. And so there's two different ways of seeing this. There's the ICJ way of seeing it, which is like when you withdraw, whatever obligation or I guess whatever aspect of the occupation you still have effective control over, like say for example access, like say for example the airspace, you still maintain, and whatever you don't have control over, you sort of like don't have anymore. And there's the way I see it, which is when you occupy Gaza, the only way to be free of your obligations as an occupier is to end the occupation in Gaza. If you retain specific aspects, specific elements of effective control, you haven't ended the occupation of Gaza. And so you continue to have all the obligations of the occupier, you are just refusing to comply with them. Right? So for me, what they do when they put their forces outside of a wall, sort of like, I don't know, ghettoizing Gaza, is not fulfilling their obligations. From the ICJ text, from the ICJ decision, you can sort of infer that what they're saying is no. I mean, you only retain an obligation to comply with whatever you are still effectively controlling. Under both views, though, mine and the courts, Israel has effective control over distribution of aid because, I mean, they are doing the aid, right? So it would be their job to protect that aid under occupation law. Birdie2 says Israel kills anyone trying to protect the aid. Yeah, I mean, we've seen World Central Kitchen, right? And we've seen now the report with Haaretz. So yeah, that's what I mean. Take Kogat's claims about this report with a grain of salt, I think, because I don't think Kogat is a very reliable entity. I think it's the Major General in control of Kogat is among the people that are in, like, South Africa's genocidal intent dossier with like saying genocidal things about Palestinians. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt, right? But so, okay, methodology. This is important because like methodology usually tells you what limitations the study has. Can you read this? I think you can read it. I'm in my computer and I can read it. So like, I hope you can. But if not, let me make it a little bit bigger. I think that works. You can't see a little bit of the edge. Let me try and move it. Okay, you should be able to see it now. Yeah, I think you can read that. Okay, so methodology. This report is based on interviews with 66 Palestinians from Gaza, as well as 4 individuals working with Gaza Coastline Municipalities Water Utility, CMWU, 31 healthcare professionals, and 15 individuals working with UN agencies and international aid organizations in Gaza. All interviews took place between October 18th, 2023 and November 28th, 2024. So up until recently, actually. Most interviews were conducted remotely, while some were conducted in person with civilians who had been evacuated out of Gaza and with non-governmental and UN personnel. Some interviews were conducted in Arabic and were later translated into English. Some interviews were conducted in English with an Arabic translator, and other interviews were conducted in English. Human Rights Watch further reviewed and analyzed photos and documents provided by the CMWU and the State of Palestine Water Sanitation and Hygiene Cluster WASH that provides details regarding the destructions of Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure. Right, so this is both interview-based and then data-based. Right, I guess that's the main point. Which is remarkable considering that you can't really go into Gaza. So the fact that they managed to speak to, what was it, 66 Palestinians from Gaza is quite impressive for Human Rights Watch. So well done. Human Rights Watch analyzed and verified. This is important because if they verify them, then they know that what the photograph says is real, which is important for methodological purposes. We know that this happened. They're not being tricked, let's say. So On June 10th and November 29th, Human Rights Watch wrote to the Israeli military to seek further information regarding specific attacks on water and sanitation infrastructure that Human Rights Watch documents in this report, as well as information regarding the entry of water-related humanitarian aid. Israeli authorities did not reply, which is interesting considering that Kogat is now replying over at Twitter. So it's sort of like, if you think of this in terms of like public diplomatic strategy, the argument here that is what I'm seeing is you say whatever you want without my input. And then when you disclose it, when you get to your conclusions, I will say what I think. So it's sort of like trying to trap Human Rights Watch. They're not trying to get Human Rights Watch to get to the most accurate information possible, because it is possible when you talk to Israel that you get, oh, this we claim this, you claim that, maybe there's something there, I can look into it and make sure that it makes sense. No, that's not what they did. They didn't tell anything to Human Rights Watch, so whatever counterclaim Human Rights Watch has not been aware of, and then they went on social media and were like, can you believe what they're saying? Like, well, but if you should have given this information to them before, and then they would have been able to like address it in the report. You didn't because you're acting in bad faith. Right, of course. The majority of researchers and interviews conducted for this report took place between November 2023 and September 2024, and most of the information contained in the report is current as of September 2024. Sadkilzid says, if I remember correctly, a few months ago there was a situation where Hamas attacked and killed looters who were allowed to act under the supervision of the IDF. Oh, I did not hear this. This is interesting. Thanks for bringing it up. High Altitude Cherenkov says, well, restrictions on physical access will limit what verified means. Yeah, but I think in this situation, I think it means verified in the sense that they've geolocated the place where it happened, and they've confirmed that it actually happened, right? There's more than one source reporting it. But yeah, fair. I mean, what does verify mean? Just one person out there says, we have forensic architecture report about Gaza and nothing is happening, like Israel can do anything to Palestinians now. So the situation, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, right? It's bad. The situation in Gaza is bad, and we need action fast. What is incredible is just how fast the evidence is piling up. Like, I mean, this started with Netanyahu talking about Amalek, right? No, how dare you say that this is genocidal? And then it started with, and then it went on to, they're starving the entire population of Palestine, right? And then it went on to, oh, wait a minute, it's not just that they're starving the entire population of Gaza. There's a part of Gaza that is extremely vulnerable where they cramped everyone, and now they're going to send a military operation into Rafah, and a bunch of people are going to die. And then it was, oh, they're actually now creating kill zones. And then it was like, oh, now they are evacuating northern Gaza and dividing Gaza in two and killing people who are in between. And now it's this report saying that Israeli soldiers are competing with each other to see who gets to kill more Palestinians, and that there are invisible lines on the ground where if you cross them, you get killed just because, and that there's just basically no controls. So at this point, the amount of evidence that this is like I mean, really ridiculous levels of inhumanity, and so clearly a genocide. It's just astounding. Of course, international law is not moving fast enough. But, I mean, at what point is the propaganda and the hegemonic narrative gonna withstand what we're seeing? Like, we have Israeli soldiers with their own words saying that they played to see who could kill more Palestinians in the latest Haaretz reporting. I mean, how much can this last? Like, there's a reason why the ICJ has been able to issue provisional measures, why the ICC has been able to issue arrest warrants, because it's so blatant that it doesn't matter how flawed the system is. It sort of like has to keep face at some point. It cannot just say, oh, no, nothing's happening, done. So I guess we'll see where this is headed, right? But let's go on. Let's go on reading the report. Oh, hi, Melina. How are you? It's so nice to see you. Um, where is the report? Here's the report. Okay, so let's start with some facts, right? What is it that um, Human Rights Watch says it has discovered, right? Um, oh, is the October 7th condemnation here? Because like, you know how these things. There you go. These reports now have to like include the mandatory condemnation of October 7th, because of the bad faith nature of their attacks. So when someone tells you, "Oh, where is Human Rights Watch's report on October 7th? Why are they talking about this and not October 7th?" Here's the October 7th part of the report. On October 7, 2023, Hamas-led Palestinian armed groups breached the fences between Gaza and southern Israel and carried out an assault, killing at least 815 civilians and taking 251 people as hostages. Human Rights Watch concluded that Palestinian armed groups committed numerous war crimes and crimes against humanity, or of murder and unlawful imprisonment during the attack. The same day, Israeli forces began its military operations in Gaza with airstrikes and artillery shelling and ordered the mass evacuation of all residents of northern Gaza on October the 13th. So not only did they say something, they actually issued the report concluding that Hamas has concluded war crimes a lot sooner than this report saying that the denial of water is illegal. Right, so of course people will tell you, "Oh, where is Human Rights Watch condemnation of October 7th?" You can tell them it's in page 40 of the report, pretty much. So there it is. Medina says, "Good, finally finished the first semester of my LLM. What a relief! Glad to be here." Oh, great! It's great that you finished the first semester. I think I think everyone is starting to finish these classes now. Chief Steve also is done with finals, and like I'm also no longer teaching. So yeah, we have more time. Although not so much, right? Because like then the year finishes um, almost now, right? I need to like I need to do stuff before the year ends. That's the tragedy of the lecturer. You guys finish your classes, and you just need to wait until the next class comes. Me, I need to prepare next year's class. I don't have all the classes done, especially when I'm hired for a new position. I need to like sort of like see what the hell I'm gonna teach at that time. So I've been working on like getting rid of like not getting rid like publishing all my articles and working on classes. So I'm actually quite busy right now. um, but yeah, Cheese Steve says fifth semester done, no longer teaching. Oh no, the campus caught on to Alonso. I'm glad you're done with your fifth semester. But yeah, no, I'm no longer teaching, but that doesn't mean that I'm not working because like we have to prepare classes for next term, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm selecting reading material because like what happens usually is you teach someone else's class, and so you need to make sure that you've either read the material that that person uses to teach, or that you are I don't know, replacing the reading material. Right. Melina says my professors have to mark all the students' assignments. Yeah, I will also need to mark, but that's in January. And I will only need because I have such a large class next term. My marking load for next term is huge. So and that happens at the end of term. So that is basically funneling all of my load, all of my like teaching, no, my marking load. And so what I'm gonna need to mark in January is actually pretty small. I think I need to mark like 4 dissertations, which is not it's not a lot. Um, High altitude Cherenkov says you staying in Europe over the holidays? No, I'm staying in the UK. In Europe, it's like I'm staying put. Yeah, no, prices to go back home are a little bit insane. The pandemic really ruined the Europe South America flying experience. Like prices used to be like £600. If you bought with anticipation, you could find like £500. Now it's like 1,500 to £2,000 at the low end. So it's just silly. So no, I'm staying in the UK. Chisif says, "Are you tenured? Tenured? No, I am not tenured. Um, so tenure is that position where you are then in a depending on the university, right? In a permanent role, usually associate professor upwards, where you can no longer be fired, basically. And other positions are usually either tenure track, so you're a lecturer with a permanent contract, or are fixed term, meaning that you are in a position for a specific period of time. I'm a fellow at LSE, which is their equivalent to lecturer with a teaching intensive contract, and it's a fixed term, so I have like a specific period. Oh, the cookie, thanks so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. You can see our mascot there celebrating that you subscribed. Um, so yeah, no, I'm not tenured. Um, I have a fixed term. How the Cherenkov says so. Alonso needs to watch his mouth or he'll get kicked. I mean, I don't think so. I'm pretty happy where I am, and I have I'm part of a great team. So I don't. I mean, I guess I'm not worried because I'm careful with what I say. Just in principle, like I don't like just saying the first thing that comes into my mind. Even on Twitter, like I think about what I'm tweeting a couple of times in my head before tweeting it. So I actually think there's a lot of like Zionist accounts that would love if they could just like go back into my old tweets and find like horrible anti-Semitic things here and there, and I just don't do that because like my allegiance is to human rights and self-determination. I've always said that. So like I fully 100% want Jewish and Israeli people to have self-determination. And so I've never said anything like that they can like use against me. So I think they are I think they are very frustrated with the fact that I am not what they wish I were. Deepen says we have tenure in the UK. It's not the same as US tenure. US tenure is kind of like more extreme. Um, But yeah, once you get to a specific hierarchy in the UK, it's very difficult for them to like, fire you. Iconoclast says, "Is there any pressure you academics face when it comes to expressing yourselves on social media?" Um, Ironically, I faced more pressure in Peru than in the UK. What I don't what I didn't experience in Peru though was policing. I've been lucky enough that no one has policed me. But I know of colleagues that have had like their tweets reviewed by panels and stuff like that, um, or like accusations from students against colleagues saying like, "Oh, I didn't like what that lecturer said." That's never happened to me. Like I said, I try to be respectful and I try to be careful, and I try to anticipate bad faith attacks. But I've seen that, and that's something that just it's crazy for me because it didn't happen in Peru. What happened in Peru was more. Um, so in Peru, I got these like nudges on my dean to say like, "Hey, can you control what people say on social media?" And my dean saying, "Nah, I won't." um, I remember there was a campaign at some point by some donors of the university to say that um, you should say that your views are personal on every tweet, not just on like your profile, but on every tweet. Um, because of course there was a limit of characters. So if you had to put "my views are personal" after every tweet, then you would be able to say less things. But it never like it never caught up. It never got any serious, and it wasn't related to Israel Palestine, of course. In Peru, it was related to indigenous revolutions and discussing the armed conflict between 1980 and 2000 and its repercussions. It also involved social protests, indigenous protests. All of those things were more policed. Um, but there were no actual, like, I never saw an actual proceeding against someone for something they had tweeted. That is something that I've only seen in Europe. Not to me, of course. That hasn't happened to me. Um, so Magic of Carlos is happy that she's okay, Kevin. Iconoclast says, "Is there any pressure?" Oh, you already answered this. Chisu says, "Are you sad you didn't win Anti-Semite of the Year?" I actually don't want to. I want to be far away from that crowd of people. Like, I don't want to be nominated. I don't know who was it that was saying like, "Oh, how could you not nominate me?" Um, was it Hasanabi? I'm not sure. I don't want to be nominated for that. Like, those people are crazy, and I don't want to be in their radar. So, uh, um. No, my fear is that in using anti-Semite so loosely, actual anti-Semitism is gonna like there was this tweet not that long ago. This guy Elliot Malin. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but um, he maybe I can find the tweet. Hold on, let me see if I can find the tweet. He was saying something like, "Oh, look at the kind of people that follow you, Alonso." Um, and so I did the search on this guy, like who this guy who was saying anti-Semitic things was, and it was quite surprising. He didn't follow me, but he did follow a bunch of right wingers, including like Elon Musk and like and wokeness and yada yada, and so it was interesting because here you have this like guy who's trying to say that I'm anti-Semitic, right? Um, oh, here it is. Let me show you the tweet. Just so you're aware, I'm going to show you a tweet that contains um, an anti-Semitic phrase. Okay, so I'm gonna try to not show the actual phrase so you guys don't see it. So you won't need to see it. Hold on. It's here. No, it's not here. It is here. So he was trying to say that I was anti-Semitic by is it loading? It's not loading. It's loading. Ooh, it's not loading. What is going on? The X went go crazy on me. What is this? What is going on, X? What is going on? Okay, Chirimbolo, I think I am having problems with X now. Is Twitter down? Or is it that I'm in an incognito window? Gosh, okay, let's see if I can put it on the other window then. Hold on. Uh, let's see if I can put it here. Wow, yeah, that was crazy. Okay, here it is. So I'm gonna try not to show the anti-Semitic text so you're not exposed to it. But so I was tweeting about October 7th, um, and this guy responded, and sorry, I did show it for a little bit. It is showing because sorry about that, guys. I'll try to edit this later. But it was something about like a very anti-Semitic comment below, and Elliot Malin saying you have the best fans, hinting that it's me who's the anti-Semitic guy, right? So I did a search on this guy. Let me see if I can show you. Hold on, who this guy was. No, I can't do that without showing you the anti-Semitism, and I don't want to do that. So forget about it. So he was really trying to prove that I was anti-Semitic, and I have a point to all this, by the way. And when I did the search, it turned out that this guy was a fan of Elon Musk and a bunch of right wingers. So it's this thing where like calling someone anti-Semite, because they, I don't know, support Palestine or wear a keffiyeh or like has a watermelon pin, ends up being like chasing the wrong windmill. Let's say like you're trying to find anti-Semitism there, but really it's the same old anti-Semitism. And I'm not saying there's no left-wing anti-Semitism. There is, of course. Um, but when we say that anti-Semitism is on the rise, it doesn't mean support for Palestine is on the rise. Of course, there are left-wing anti-Semites out there, but the anti-Semites that are organizing and marching the streets of the United States are your average right-wing Nazis. So this guy was saying like, oh, look at your fans, Alonso. It wasn't my fan, it was a right-winger. And this focus on finding anti-Semitism, um, this focus on finding anti-Semitism on the pro-Palestinian side is allowing, like they're so focused on that, even the ADL, that it is allowing Nazis to organize better and march the streets and like have, I don't know, the U.S. government's ear, right? So I don't know. I don't want to promote this idea of anti-Semitism where like, yeah, Hassan Abi, Greta, Candace Owens, Bassem Youssef, and others were nominated. Yeah, so like Greta Thunberg has not said a single anti-Semitic thing in her life. I've never heard anything anti-Semitic come from her at all, right? Hassan Abi, like, he says forceful things, but he has never said, I mean, he continuously condemns anti-Semitism in his stream, right? It's kind of crazy that you want to pinpoint him as anti-Semitic when he specifically all the time says, like, don't bring anti-Semitic shit to my channel. And Bassem Youssef, like, I mean, he's a comedian for crying out loud. So yeah. Condor says it's because you're not logged in. It isn't because like I usually do this. I usually share an incognito window because I if I share my own screen, then you can see my the back end of my Twitch, and I don't want to show you that. So, but yeah, yeah, I'm not at all disappointed about not being selected as for that category. So let's continue with the report, shall we? So, let's see. So let's start. So, Human Rights Watch says, since October 7th, 2023, military operations in Gaza have resulted in the destruction or damage to a significant amount of Gaza's water and sewage infrastructure, including the Mekorot and UAE pipelines, wells, water treatment plants, portions of the water pipeline network, and sewage and wastewater treatment facilities. In several cases, Human Rights Watch found that Israeli forces targeted water, sanitation, and hygiene wash infrastructure deliberately without any apparent military objective present. As described below, in these cases, all available information indicates that the destruction was not incidental to attacks on military objectives, but deliberate, as Israeli ground forces were in control of the areas at the times when they destroyed wash infrastructure. Israeli forces demolished facilities in areas a few hundred meters from the Gaza-Israel perimeter, which were under Israeli military control from the early stages of the conflict. So yeah, this is this idea that like what Israel is doing is deliberately destroying key infrastructure in Gaza without any like military target in store. And so Israel's argument that the only defense I've seen is, hey, it's a war zone. You need to be able to like destroy whatever you're holding that might be used by your enemy later. And the problem is that when that thing that you're destroying is the water supply, you're not really distinguishing between water that might be used for military purposes from water that might be used for civilian purposes. Like clearly, if you destroy all water in Gaza, then what you're doing is you're depriving civilians of essential goods for their survival. You sort of know that that will generate hardship, the people cannot live without what everyone knows that people cannot live without water. Oh hey Jens, how are you? Hope you're feeling better. I've been following your Twitter account and like it looks like your situation was kind of gruesome, so I'm glad to see you around. Hopefully I can provide some distraction. But yeah, so these destructions of infrastructure have no real military value other than creating hardship for the population. So additional information suggests Israeli forces were not under fire or seeking a battlefield advantage over Palestinian armed groups when they destroyed water infrastructure, including the video troops posted of themselves methodically setting and wiring explosives inside a water reservoir, and satellite imagery showing military bulldozers and bulldozer tracks leading from Israeli territory to various wastewater plants, where the large solar panel arrays powering the plants had been methodically bulldozed. In other cases, Israeli attacks destroyed or damaged wash infrastructure, but it was not possible to determine whether the attack had targeted the infrastructure itself or Palestinian armed groups or other military objectives. Oh, hey, these MOB, thanks for following. Welcome to the community. And I'm glad, Jens, that you're getting better. So, in other cases, Israeli attacks destroyed or damaged wash infrastructure, but it was not possible to determine whether the attacks had targeted the infrastructure itself or Palestinian armed groups or whether military objective or other military objectives. Even in the cases of a military presence, unless the infrastructure is solely being used for military purposes, this is what I was saying, which there is no evidence of, wash infrastructure maintains its status as objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population, which forces are prohibited from attacking, destroying, or rendering useless under the laws of war. And it points to the ICRC customary international law study that says that it is doubtful, however, whether this exception also applies to non-international conflicts. It doesn't matter because, infrastructure, Palestinian infrastructure is subject to an international conflict. And of course, Israel will say there's a military exception to this. But the question would be, was it really militarily necessary to destroy all the water infrastructure in Gaza? Right? Do you not know that people die when they don't drink water? BCH 219 says, I have to go, but I can't believe lo interesante que podría encontrar en Twitch. Te sigo viendo. Abrazo. Oh, great. BCH just found us through Twitter. So welcome to the community. I'm glad you found it interesting. And yeah, come by often. I'm here Thursdays and Sundays. Actually, I hadn't noticed. We are at, how are we doing with viewers? We're at 26 viewers. That's great. Okay, so let's go on. Where's the report here? A third set of cases considered involve damage to or destruction of water infrastructure where the party responsible for the attack could not be determined. So, sure, it might have been someone else. It might have not been Israel. It might have been like people participating in hostilities on their own or a Palestinian armed group, Islamic Jihad, Hamas. They don't know. Overall, the devastating impact of the hostilities on wash infrastructure increases the likelihood of civilian harm in cases where Israeli forces have attacked wash infrastructure, and the risk that such attacks were disproportionate compared with any expected military advantage. Israeli military officials and authorities knew or should have known the devastating impact of Israeli attacks on the accessibility of water to civilians in Gaza. And yet, despite the consistent, overwhelming reporting since the escalation in October 2023, demonstrating that civilians in Gaza did not have access to adequate amounts of water for survival, Israeli forces have continued to intentionally destroy water and sanitation infrastructure, and Israeli officials have also continued to impose restrictions on water, fuel, electricity, and imports of supplies needed to repair or maintain wash infrastructure on Gaza. So essentially what Human Rights Watch is saying is here, they destroyed this infrastructure knowing that it would produce harm. The question is, what kind of harm? So how do you penalize this? What crime do you assign to this conduct? And this is where the report gets a little bit more interesting. So we will get there eventually. Right? But take into consideration, this is not just cutting off water, this is actively seeking to destroy infrastructure that is essential for the survival of the civilian population. Okay? Let's see, what else did I select here? And of course, it's not just that, it's also obstructing the entry and movement of water-related materials and infrastructure. So it's not just destroying it, it is also preventing it from getting fixed or preventing it from getting in after it is, after you generate the need for that water, right? There's no more water and you won't get water. Right? So Israeli authorities have blocked repair materials and replacement and additional water infrastructure materials from entering Gaza. So you could say then, oh, we destroyed them, but then we allowed them to be repaired because we don't want people to be without water. That's not the case. Staff members of UN agencies and international non-governmental groups providing and coordinating humanitarian aid to Gaza told Human Rights Watch that Israeli authorities had not allowed in any water filtration systems or allowed in any water filtration systems or any parts that might assist in water production since the start of the war, except when they were a part of a setup for a temporary healthcare facility. Water sanitation and hygiene cluster staff also told Human Rights Watch that Israeli authorities had systematically barred chlorine, which is needed to disinfect water, from entering Gaza for months after the hostilities escalated. So there is no reason why you should ban chlorine. Like, there's no military advantage possible for you to ban chlorine. Right? What could possibly be that excuse? Is it military grade chlorine? No, it's not. I mean, this is pretty damning stuff. Hold on. It's not 95. It's 100. So this is important. Before October 7, 2023, about 500 trucks per working day entered Gaza with commercial and humanitarian goods. From October 21st, 2023 to May 2024, when Israel ceased and closed the Rafah border crossing, only an average of 132 trucks, so a fifth basically, per day entered from May to August. Only an average of 33 trucks per day entered. I wanted to look at this. Okay, it's not only just that Israel destroyed the infrastructure, it's not just that they cut the water, it's not just that they did not repair the damage that they caused, it's also that that damage caused death and illnesses on the civilian population of Gaza. So the report says, according to the WHO, lack of potable water and damage and destruction of sewage and wastewater infrastructure have led to the outbreak of waterborne diseases, including hepatitis A and diarrheal disease, as well as cases of severe dehydration in Gaza. As of June 2024, the WHO reported over 1.5 million cases of diseases and infections among Gaza's population of just over 2 million people. So 1.8 million cases of infections and disease in a population of 2 million is insane, right? Of course, this does not count people. I mean, it counts people that might have gotten 2 infections in a row. So it doesn't mean that only 200,000 Gazans, Palestinians in Gaza, didn't get an infection. It might mean that a very like a smaller group of people were very unfortunate to get infections very often. The rapid spread and severity of these infections and diseases is linked to the population's lack of access to adequate water and sanitation, according to doctors and health officials. Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have died as a result of malnutrition. Also, it's likely that thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have died as a result of malnutrition, dehydration, and disease as of August 2024, though these deaths are not being consistently tracked or reported. This is important because if you go to Kogat's Twitter page right now, you know, the Israeli humanitarian, quote-unquote humanitarian agency, they are saying, among other things, that there's not a single, you know, specific person that died of dehydration in this report. That they didn't pinpoint, I don't know, John Smith died of dehydration. And so this is all like hearsay. But that's sort of like the Trump's COVID strategy, right? Remember, Trump's COVID strategy was, if you don't test for COVID, then no one has COVID, and therefore there is no COVID, right? It's sort of the same, right? Oh, you didn't find anyone who died of dehydration. Well, it's a genocide, so we're not actually being able to register the cause of death of everyone who dehydrates in the middle of Gaza while it's destroyed. So it's actually very difficult to find people that are registered as died of dehydration, but we can talk to doctors and say, look, there's just not enough water for people to not have dehydrated. And I saw people that were dehydrated. I just didn't see them die. Right? So, oh, but you don't have any cases of dehydration becomes a very bad faith argument of like, well, I mean, then I guess you should let me in and check for myself, which is something that Israel, of course, is not letting anyone, not just Human Rights Watch, but any kind of press into Gaza. Jens says they all moved to a farm up north. That's cold. It's a really bad faith argument. Right? It is the equivalent of what Jens is saying, right? It's a bad argument, basically. But okay, let's continue. Here. Asma Taha, an American nurse practitioner who volunteered in Gaza in May 2024, and the image is not graphic, by the way. The face is also not showing. Asma Taha, an American nurse practitioner who volunteered in Gaza in May 2024, told Human Rights Watch, "We saw babies pass away every single day from a combination of malnutrition, dehydration, and disease. She said that if these deaths were being recorded at all, the cause of death was not listed as malnutrition or dehydration due to the conflation of different factors leading to the deaths. She explained, however, that malnutrition and dehydration were the root of the problem. You're not fed well, therefore you have a bad immune system. See, this is the problem. Israel is then turning and saying, you actually didn't find anyone who died of malnutrition. And they're saying, well, yeah, because like we couldn't actually count them properly. Another nurse who volunteered in Gaza, Abira Mohammed, said that out of 56 surgical patients she and her colleagues tracked during her 2-week stay in Gaza, 23 died. She explained that while she could not say how many deaths were directly caused by malnutrition or dehydration, it was definitely a factor. So you have like nurses that are telling you like, look, I tracked cases and people died of dehydration, I'm sure. I just can't actually tell you specifically, right? And this is what Israel is hanging on to. In February 2024, the WHO, World Food Program, and UNICEF jointly reported that at least 90% of children under 5 are affected by one or more infectious diseases, including waterborne disease, and that 70% of children under 5 had diarrhea. Then they cite the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, which is the IPC, which they basically track, starvation. Which classified food insecurity in different countries based on scientific standards, reported that about 1.84 million people across the Gaza Strip are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity, classified in IPC phase 3 or above, which is bad. Like there's 5 phases, 1 to 5. Right? If you're 5, you're like famished. You're in a famine. Phase 3 is bad enough, which is defined in part by the existence of households high or above usual acute malnutrition. Okay, so this basically paints a pretty bad, I guess, outlook for Gaza, and it tells you what Israel has been doing to cause it. It shows you what do you call it, the causality between 1 and 2, right? But let's keep on reading. So destruction of healthcare, housing, agriculture, forced displacements. Remember, if you guys have a question about what I'm talking about or something else entirely, just write it on the chat. Write it on the chat, and I'll get to it eventually. Okay. So this is look at Colonel Yogev Bar Shesht, deputy head of the civil administration, in a video posted online from Gaza, November 4th, 2024. Whoever returns here, if they return hereafter, will find scorched earth. No houses, no agriculture, no nothing. They have no future. So this to me is very plainly genocidal by someone who has the power to carry out that genocide. Scorched earth, no nothing, no future. You are making that place unlivable for human habitation. Since October 2023, the destruction of and damage of healthcare facilities and other critical infrastructure has compounded the effects of the Israeli government's deprivation of water to the civilian population. The hostilities have also resulted in the destruction of much of Gaza's housing and agricultural areas necessary for food production. Some of the vast destructions, such as the razing of the vast majority of structures in a designated buffer zone and corridor, have clearly been perpetrated by Israeli forces for reasons explained in Section 3, destruction of what we already read, and are prima facie unlawful. In many cases, it is not possible to determine conclusively the cause of destruction or damage to infrastructure or assess the lawfulness of attacks that destroyed infrastructure. So essentially, this is going to okay, not only were you creating catastrophic effects on the civilian population of Gaza, you also destroyed healthcare infrastructure, which meant that you could not treat the people that were suffering from the conditions that you created and that you kept from repairing. So again, it's a pretty damning outlook, right? So they go into attacks on healthcare, attacks on housing. It's 80% of the buildings in northern Gaza have been damaged or destroyed, as well as half of the buildings across Gaza based on analysis of satellite data. Right, so this is, and also agriculture. They have apparently destroyed agricultural products and land, including raising orchards, fields, and greenhouses. indicates that orchards, fields, and greenhouses have been systematically razed. High-resolution satellite imagery shows bulldozers were used to destroy fields and orchards, leaving sand and dirt, indicating that the Israeli military caused the destruction. They reached out for comment on the alleged razing of agricultural land and did not receive a response. 65% of our cropland in Gaza has been damaged. The destruction of agricultural lands not only exacerbates current food shortages, but also have devastating long-term effects for food production in Gaza. So no water and then no food, and then you displace them. So again, it's a perfect storm of the dire situation that Palestinians in Gaza are facing based on the denial of simply water and the effects, the efforts by Israel to make sure that that denial of water can't be fixed, can't be cured, can't be repaired, nothing. You don't even have a home to return to drink water. You go see where you find water, right? So it's important to read this part of the report because it builds the urgency, the momentum of this kind of like actions. At this point, if you're like me, you're reading this and saying, "Holy crap! Like this is terrible." And you're thinking in your mind, like if the whole point is that there will be no water in Gaza, that you will purposefully destroy aquifers and wash infrastructure, and then you don't let them repair it, and then you destroy food, you destroy agriculture, you destroy healthcare, all the things that might help you overcome the lack of water, you start thinking, man, this is genocidal, right? So it's important to read these sections first before going into the legal analysis. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go into that legal analysis. We've now seen like a pretty decent summary of what this report entails. And so after this, the report starts talking about international law, which is, yay, my area of expertise. I'm going to skip. So this first section on international law is basically just restating what the law says. Right? So I'm going to skip that. And I want to get directly to the part where the report talks about what crimes have been committed. Okay, I'm just going to scroll past really fast these sections. So it talks about like war crimes, what could potentially be a war crime, human rights violations. Human rights violations are here. And then what international criminal law says and what genocide, what the Convention Against Genocide say, and what have been like recent court rulings. Of course, the ICC issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. And the ICJ, right? Provisional measures by the ICJ. And then it talks about humanitarian law. What are the obligations of the occupier? If you guys want to go through this, let me know. But I've gone through it. It's basically just restating articles, so it's not really that fun or useful. So it's basically saying why starving people without water is illegal. Right, attacking objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population and denying access to humanitarian aid intended for civilians in need, including deliberately impeding humanitarian aid, may constitute violations of the prohibition of starvation. Which I think is pretty clear by now, right? Starvation is being used as a weapon of war in Gaza. So let's go to page 165. Was it? Oh, I skipped too much. Hold on. Let me find that section. Sorry. All right. Okay. International criminal law and the Genocide Convention. Crimes against humanity. Right. So first, Human Rights Watch is gonna determine whether what it has described that Israel is doing constitute a crime against humanity. As some of you may know, a crime against humanity is a systematic, generalized attack on a civilian population as part of a organizational or state policy. So if you kill one person, that's a murder. You killed someone and you committed murder. But if you start killing a lot of people, as a result of some government policy, and those people are civilians, or that people like you're not fighting a war. Let's say you're not killing combatants. You're systematically and in a general manner killing a lot of civilians. Each of those murders then becomes the crime against humanity of murder. So crime against humanity, it's something you add to a normal crime to make it an international crime. What you add is you're making this attack on the civilian population systematic and general, right? Um, So definitions vary, but the definition found in the Rome Statute, which largely reflects customary international law and is therefore binding on all states, includes a range of serious human rights abuses committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. Right. The Rome Statute sets out crimes that can amount to a crime against humanity when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. They can be committed during peace or in armed conflict. And there's no hierarchy between among crimes against humanity. They have the same gravity. And so, essentially, it's restating what a crime against humanity is. Right? It's a systematic and widespread attack against the civilian population. Okay, and it is asking the question: is it systematic and generalized to cut water from Gaza, and could it be a crime? Jartov says, "Oh man, I started watching at the start, but I was so cozy I fell asleep. Time to hit the VOD. Oh man, you fell asleep when I'm talking? That's not nice." Okay, I need you guys to know that when you guys fall asleep when we're teaching class in college, like in uni, we notice, and it's not nice. Thankfully, it has not happened to me a lot, but it's not nice. I was curled up in bed. Okay, I forgive you, Jartov. Okay, don't fall asleep when your lecturers are talking. We actually notice everything. We notice when you try to copy like an exam. Um, and we notice when you're sleepy. We also notice when you're on Facebook, or not Facebook at this point, like probably Instagram. Um, so the statute defines attack as a course of action involving multiple commission of acts listed as crimes against humanity, pursuant or in furtherance of a state or organization policy. Right. So it has to be someone needs to have organized this. Right. Widespread refers to the scale of the attacks or number of victims, whereas systematic refers to the organized nature of the violent acts and the improbability of their random occurrence, often referring to a pattern or methodological plan. So this is like cancerous government, right, or cancerous organization. They go out and start attacking in different ways, with different mens rea, individuals in a widespread and systematic way, in a mechanical way, in a methodical way, and not just like one time. Like generally, this is a campaign, right? So let me go to what crimes can be committed. Okay. Where is it? Okay, the crime against humanity of extermination. This is the first crime that Human Rights Watch analyzes. It analyzes two crimes: extermination and genocide. Okay, and the first one is extermination. Let's look at what it says about whether what Israel is doing is the crime against humanity of extermination. Which you should remember, the ICC prosecutor has requested an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant for extermination. The ICC said that they did not have enough evidence elements to approve the issuing of arrest warrants for the crime of extermination, but the ICC will, the prosecutor will insist and probably send more evidence, I'm sure, because the chamber actually said that what was missing was not a key element of the crime of extermination, which we will talk about in a second, related to the conditions of life that you are imposing on a population, which is like the key one. Let me explain. It'll make sense in a second. So extermination is defined as the intentional infliction of conditions of life, inter alia, the deprivation of access to food and medicine, calculated to bring about the destruction of part of a population. Okay, so this is a very similar kind of like action than genocide. The difference between extermination and genocide usually is the intent. With what intent are you exterminating people? If you're exterminating people because you want to exterminate these people, that's extermination. But if you're exterminating these people because you want to destroy the group as such, to destroy the group itself, that's genocide. It's a very nuanced definition. If you ask me, it's mostly a political difference because it's so difficult to prove genocide. Um, but yeah, theoretically, two different crimes, right? Um, Dizimo B says, I actually have to study for my civil law exam, but this is more interesting. Well, I don't like civil law. Which civil law is it? Like, are you studying like in a civil law country, and if so, which civil law, or are you studying in a global north country and just studying all of civil law as if it was one thing? Because I studied, I think it was like 11 civil law classes in my law school years. Um, oh, Jartov, that's so nice of you to say that you dream of me. Um, so this is like according to the elements of the crimes of the ICC, this is the separate document to the Rome Statute that incorporates like what do you need to meet for the crime to exist. It says according to the elements of the crimes, the crime against humanity of extermination includes the following elements: one, the perpetrator killed one or more persons, including by inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction or of part of the population. This, the ICC prosecutor has said that it like existed in the arrest warrants that it issued against Gallant and Netanyahu. So the ICC prosecutor says it has reasonable grounds to believe that such infliction of conditions of life was committed, which is huge. It's one of the main things that you need to prove, right? The conduct constituted or took part of mass killing of members of the civilian population. The conduct was committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against the civilian population, and the perpetrator knew that the conduct was part of or intended to be the conduct or intended the conduct to be part of. Oh, that was complicated. Sorry, I'm gonna read it again. And the perpetrator knew that the conduct was part of or intended the conduct to be part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. So as you can see, these two here, these are just what makes this extermination a crime against humanity, right? The attack is widespread or systematic, and it's and you knew that it was widespread and systematic. And these two are what make that specific crime against humanity extermination, right? You need to have killed people, including by subjecting them to conditions of life that destroy them, and you have to mass kill them. Okay, so the difference between extermination and genocide is really, really nuanced. So mass killing, let's analyze the first element. The killing of one or more persons underlying the crime against humanity of extermination must constitute or take part as part of mass killing. And intent. With respect to the mental element of extermination, acts must have been intended to kill persons, including by inflicting conditions of life. The words inflict and calculated indicate a deliberate intent. So essentially, you need to want to create those conditions. So here's the meat of the sandwich, right? What is Human Rights Watch saying about exterminations? Is Israeli authorities and forces have taken actions, including cutting off and later restricting water and electricity, restricting fuel, destroying and blah, 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 that have left the population of Gaza without adequate access to the amount of water needed for survival for nearly a year. Gaza is comprised of mostly civilians. Israeli authorities have repeatedly stated that they are targeting the entire Palestinian population of Gaza in their decisions to cut off water, fuel, and other necessities to the strip. Israeli authorities and forces actions to deprive the civilian population of Gaza of water is both widespread and systematic. So we're getting there, right? And since October 7th, Israeli authorities have repeatedly stated their intention to cut the population of Gaza from water, food, fuel, electricity, humanitarian aid, blah, 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 right? All the things that we already know. People cannot survive over an extended period of time without access to adequate water. Surprise, surprise, right? Israeli authorities' effective control over the population of Gaza's access to water, electricity, and other critical needs over Gaza's land and sea borders, and what items can and cannot enter Gaza, combined with their detailed knowledge of the humanitarian needs of Gaza's population, where people live, and mass individual population movements during the conflict, including evacuations, is evidence that they intended for the policy of denying adequate water and sanitation to the population to cause fatal harms to large numbers of civilians, or were aware of the consequences that their actions and recklessly disregarded them. So this is very important. Human Rights Watch is saying you knew that you were creating mass harm to these people. You knew, and yet you continued. In fact, that's the only thing that I can see you wanted, right? You intended for your policy to cause fatal harms. You intended for your policy to cause fatal harms. This is the key. Like, they intended for their policy to cause fatal harms to a large number of civilians. It's either that or you knew and you still carried on. I think this is very important for reasons that I will discuss in a minute, so I want to insist on this. Please remember this as we go forward reading this report, okay? Because the conclusion of Human Rights Watch here is the situation documented in this report shows that Israeli authorities at the most senior level were responsible for the destruction, including the deliberate destruction of water and sanitation infrastructure, the prevention of repairs and damaged water and sanitation infrastructure, and cutting off or severely restricting water, electricity, and fuel. These acts have likely caused thousands of deaths and will likely continue to cause deaths into the future, including after the cessation of hostilities. The policies remain in place and are ongoing despite numerous warnings to Israeli officials on their impact, including from the ICJ. So the International Court of Justice was telling you, dude, stop doing this, and you were like, nah, I'm going to keep on doing it. So you cannot tell me that you didn't know that you were causing this harm. Again, this is very important. It will be very important when we discuss genocide. Okay, therefore, and read the language here, okay? Measure the language here. Therefore, Human Rights Watch finds that Israeli policies have amounted to the intentional creation of conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of the civilian population of Gaza. This was part of a mass killing of members of the civilian population, and as a state policy amounts to a widespread and systematic attack directed against the civilian population. Therefore, all elements of the crime against humanity of extermination are met. Israeli officials are responsible for the crime against humanity of extermination, which is an ongoing crime. This is categorical stuff. Okay. Israel is committing extermination because it has created conditions of life that are destroying a large part of the population of Gaza, and they wanted to destroy that large population in a widespread and systematic way. This is a crime against humanity of extermination, and Human Rights Watch is telling us that is what is going on in Gaza right now. There is an effort to exterminate Palestinians. Right? Say it with me. Right? There's an effort to try and exterminate Palestinians. This is a very important finding by Human Rights Watch. It's very valuable. It is in line with what the prosecutor of the ICC has said, that he has reasonable grounds to believe that extermination is happening. And I suspect it'll be what the chamber will eventually accept, because again, the chamber of the ICC said that thank you. That the chamber of the ICC said that the conditions of life were being created. That the conditions of life were being created. So the most difficult part of this crime of extermination happened. So essentially, what the chamber presumably wanted from the prosecutor was more evidence of mass killing, which should be easy enough. It should be easy enough. So I anticipate that eventually the arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant will be expanded to cover the crime of extermination. And so this is a big finding. But unfortunately, there is no jurisdiction at the International Court of Justice for the crime of extermination. The only treaty that has jurisdiction at the ICJ level is the crime of genocide. And this is why genocide needs to be evaluated as well, because South Africa is only suing Israel for genocide. It's not suing Israel for extermination. Extermination is a crime that will be prosecuted at the ICC level. Criminal law, individual people will be prosecuted of extermination. And this, I'm fairly sure will happen. I'm fairly sure it will happen. Okay, I don't know when, but I'm pretty sure that the prosecutor will submit added evidence to the chamber, and the chamber will say that there should be an arrest warrant against Netanyahu. And I don't know when exactly, but I do know that political winds change, mistakes happen, planes land in places they're not supposed to. So we have, I mean, we have to think in the long term. It is possible that we might see Netanyahu in the ICC or Gallant, considering that people used to say that many other wanted people were never going to be prosecuted, and then all of a sudden they were. Right. So let's look into genocide. But let me catch up with the chat. So Dezemo says you're studying Austrian civil law. Oh, amazing. I think Peru had I'm Peruvian. Peru had a lot of Austrian influence when we designed our constitutional tribunal, I think. Iconoclast says Haaretz posted a piece today with this headline: "No civilians, everyone's a terrorist. IDF soldiers expose arbitrary killings and rampant lawlessness in Gaza's Netzarim corridor." I read it. I didn't read it. I saw the snippets that were shared online because it's paywalled, but it is damning as well, right? It is extermination, right? It is what Human Rights Watch is describing, right? Hayat Cherenkov says another topic for later could be trials about war crimes in Syria. Not at the ICC, but definitely in other places, in other countries. Yes, absolutely. We can talk about that later. I'm almost done with this report anyway. Iconoclast, Jartofast Iconoclast, I was looking at earlier, and it's horrific, but what's worse is it's not surprising. Yeah, it's not surprising. We have seen the footage of kids with bullets in their brains. Magic of Girls, I can do a video on that, but I would need a paywall-free version of the article because I don't have membership to Haaretz. Yes, they do hold competitions for who kills most Palestinians. It's quite disgusting, honestly. And the incredible thing is that these testimonies are anonymous, right? So I don't know if they're saying these things because they feel like monsters and need to clean their conscience, and then they went to the press to like whistleblow. But from what I've said, I can't discard the possibility that they are just talking and they don't find anything weird about this. Because the things I've heard Israeli military people say are really, really disturbing. But okay, let's talk about the genocide component of this report then. So, genocide. You all know what the crime of genocide is, so I'm going to skip this part. What is that? Oh, thanks, Jens. I will go check it out in a minute. I'll open it so I don't lose the link. Okay, genocide. So I'm not going to go through the details of what genocide is because I think we've discussed this ad nauseum in this channel already. So I'm just going to skip that and go to this. Conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. Essentially what Israel is saying is this thing, conditions of life, this is one of the actus reus of genocide, right? Oh, is this where they say? Oh, I'm going to need to read this. It says the crime of genocide in international law involves the specific intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, or racial or religious group, as such by killing the members or by causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, or deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, or imposing measures intended to prevent births, or forcibly transferring the children of the group to another group. Genocide is distinct from other crimes because of this specific intent. As a constitutive element of the crime, genocide can be committed against a part, but a substantial or significant or of an identified group. Significant part of an identified group. So, the following elements are needed in order to demonstrate the commission of genocide by deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. The perpetrator inflicted certain conditions of life upon one or more persons. Such persons or persons belong to a particular national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The perpetrator intended to destroy, in whole or in part, the national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. The conditions of life that were deliberately inflicted were calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the group, in whole or in part, and the conduct took place in the context of a manifest pattern of similar conduct directed against the group or was conduct that could itself effect such destruction. From that definition itself, the analysis for the crime of extermination has ticked several of these. The one key difference continues to be intent to destroy. See, the factual element of this act of genocide is very similar to the definition of the crime against humanity of extermination. And this is the first time that I will have some qualms with Human Rights Watch here. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I come to Human Rights Watch with nothing but love. Like I interned at Human Rights Watch. I think their work is amazing. But one thing I'll push back on is the concept that they're using here for act of genocide. Okay, they are calling the conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction an act of genocide, and it is true. It's if you do if you treat the Genocide Convention as a series of actus reus, so here's the Genocide Convention. You can say that each and every one of these is a quote act of genocide because it's the actus reus of genocide, right? So it's the conduct that you need to commit genocide. So killing members of the group is a genocidal act or act of genocide. Causing serious bodily or mental harm is an act of genocide. And so you could say that every time you kill someone within a genocide, each and every one of those killings is an act of genocide. So Srebrenica was an act of genocide, and the whole thing was a genocide, not an act of genocide. There's this famous press conference, I think it was with Clinton, was it? It was Clinton during the Rwandan genocide, where they keep asking him, like, is Rwanda a genocide? And he keeps responding, well, there have been acts of genocide, but not a genocide. And I think it is important to pick that up here, in that what we're being told is that this act of genocide is very similar. But I will push back on this, because if you find out that people are being killed with genocidal intent, you have not really found an act of genocide. You've found a genocide. You can tell me that within that general mass killing, each and every one of those is an act of killing, an act of genocide. But when you start talking about acts of genocide as opposed to a genocide, we start getting to thorny ground, like Clinton grounds, right? So let's keep an eye out for this word, because if you want to be very specific, this is the actus reus of genocide. It's not that there are 5 different genocidal acts or acts of genocide. It's that each and every one of these can constitute a genocide. So let's be mindful about that little word, act of genocide, as we go forward, okay? Okay, let's go back then to the report. The ICTY and the ICTR have both stated that conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction of a group include circumstances that would lead to a slow death. Deliberately inflicting conditions such as the lack of proper food, water, shelter, clothing, or sanitation are examples of acts that would be punishable under the Genocide Convention if committed with genocidal intent. The ICC is issuing an arrest warrant against former Sudanese President Omar Bashir for his responsibility for crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in Sudan, found reasonable grounds to believe that Sudanese government forces acts of contaminating water pumps and wells in towns and villages inhabited by members of tribes that were being attacked by those forces were committed as part of a genocidal policy. Again, didn't say that each and every one of those poisonings was a genocidal act, right? It said genocidal policy. So again, let's be mindful about those words, okay? And here we get to the intent. You guys know this, so I'm gonna brush past this really fast. I just want to get to the meat as fast as I can. Okay, I'm aware that we are at like 1 hour and a half already. So the crime of genocide requires that there be specific or special intent to destroy a group in whole or in part. As such, the ICJ has held that specific intent requires that the perpetrator, by one of the prohibited acts enumerated in Article 4 of the statute, seeks to achieve the destruction in whole or in part of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Right. So you commit one of the genocidal acts, the so-called genocidal acts, with a specific intent. That's genocide. Right. Intent can be inferred from actions, including evidence which demonstrates a consistent pattern of conduct. And this is the thing that we've talked about this ad nauseum here as well. Under the ICJ standard, genocidal intent may be inferred from a pattern of conduct with the high threshold of when this is the only inference that could reasonably be drawn from the acts in question. We know this, we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into that much detail. If you want to know more about this, I made a video about the Amnesty report, covered this in extensive. So go into the video on demand or to my YouTube page and check that out. It's called "Did Amnesty Change the Definition of Genocide?" The answer being no. So let me skip this because these are things that we know. So the ICTY has held that the perpetrator must intend to destroy the group as such, meaning as a separate entity, distinct and separate entity, and not merely some individuals because of their membership in a particular group. Furthermore, the tribunal has found that the evidence must establish that it is the group that has been targeted, not merely specific individuals within that group. The ICTR has interpreted as such to mean that the act must be committed against an individual because the individual was a member of a specific group, and specifically because he belonged to this group, so that the victim is the group itself, not merely the individual. And here you go like, oh, we're dealing with water, right? So you cannot really say, I don't want you to not have water. You sort of have to say, none of you will have water. So this is like works in our advantage, I would guess. And here's the thing. Actions by Israeli authorities that amount to acts of genocide. Okay, the ICJ has found that the Palestinian people appear to constitute a distinct national ethnic group, so they are protected from genocide. And that the Gaza Strip is a substantial part of Palestinians. Through the cutting of electricity and water, and the clear destruction, through everything that Israel has done, basically, Israeli authorities have intentionally inflicted on Palestinians in Gaza conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. We've already established this because it wasn't the crime of extermination, right? We've already cleared that out. And yeah, the ICC has found reasonable grounds that these conditions of life have actually been inflicted. So a bunch of stuff that they did. It is also very likely that slow death will continue in Gaza even after hostilities end due to the damage and destruction to the water sanitation. So essentially, we're going through again all the things that Israeli soldiers have done, right? These are the conditions of life is what Human Rights Watch is calling the genocidal act of subjecting the population to conditions of life. Okay. So evidence of genocidal intent. This is the thick of the report. Okay, so bear with me. This is the important part. So don't get distracted. Don't go to sleep, Jartov. Evidence of genocidal intent. Genocide requires the commission of an act or acts of genocide with intent to destroy. The ICJ has said that to draw such an inference of genocidal intent from a pattern of conduct, it would need to be the only inference that could reasonably be drawn from the acts in question. Israel has denied having that intent, that it acted with the intention to defend itself, to terminate threats, not to destroy Palestinians. And this is like the Human Rights Watch going all over and over about like, oh, but the ICJ told you that you were endangering Palestinians, and yet you continued. So can we infer intent from this? In the 3 months since the Provisional Measures Order, Israeli authorities and forces continued to destroy water and sanitation infrastructure. Conditions in Gaza continued to worsen. And then a new set of provisional measures happened. And then came the second order. So essentially, Human Rights Watch is building a case of like you knew what was happening. Okay, Israeli authorities and forces have continued to destroy and damage water sanitation infrastructure and have continued to block electricity from Gaza. As of September 2024, most residents of Gaza still do not have access to adequate amounts of water needed for survival, and doctors and nurses have reported that many patients have died from preventable diseases. Such actions by Israeli authorities have not targeted specific individuals, but rather the population as a whole. So now you have conditions of life were inflicted to the population as a whole. So again, we're getting to the point of what's missing for intent to exist. Their knowledge of Gaza's water infrastructure, as well as the impact of their actions to cut electricity and fuel and water, and their continued pattern of actions to deprive the population of water, demonstrate an intent to cut off the population of adequate access to water and sanitation required for survival, which would inevitably lead to death. So again, this is the same thing that they found with the extermination claim. You cut off water and you knew what would happen if you cut off water. In addition to the Israeli authorities' cumulative actions, so not just from your pattern of conduct, evidence suggesting intent by at least some senior Israeli authorities to destroy or at least part of the Palestinian population of Gaza as such may be taken from the statements by high-ranking Israeli officials with the power to set policy over Gaza and army commanders. They have called for Palestinians in Gaza to be deprived of life-sustaining necessities, including food, electricity, etc., etc. So you knew what we're doing, you knew what that would cause, and you also told me specifically what you were doing. Right? So we're starting to build this like nicely ringing, case for genocidal intent, right? Or so we would think. In addition to Israeli authorities' calls for water, fuel, electricity, and humanitarian aid to be cut, some senior officials made statements calling for the destruction of Gaza or calling for the destruction of all Palestinians in Gaza. So again, what is missing for you to conclude that there is a genocide? Senior leaders also mentioned Amalek. So we're building this case of like there is genocidal intent, expressed and inferred, right? And here's the key. These statements in and of themselves are calls for the collective punishment, a war crime, and may also amount to incitement to genocide. Okay, so not genocidal intent, but they incite genocide, but not yet. You've not yet told me what about genocidal intent. But they also indicate an intent to deprive the entire population of Gaza of essentials of life, including water. The predictable result of Israel's pursuit of a long-term policy of depriving civilians in Gaza from access to adequate water and sanitation has been to inflict conditions of life we know that will destroy Palestinians in Gaza. So you inflicted this on Palestinians, and it was predictable what would happen. So what would happen? Israeli officials have deliberately inflicted and continue to inflict conditions of life in Palestinians in Gaza, calculated to bring about mass deaths, and which have and continue to cause mass deaths. This is changed, right? The text is inflict conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. Here, this is the quote, right? What Human Rights Watch is saying is mass death, not destruction, mass death. So this sounds like extermination again. So where are we, Human Rights Watch? What's going on with intent here? This is the conclusion. The evidence set out in this report shows that Israeli forces deliberately and systematically destroyed at least some of Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure when Israeli forces were in control of the area, that Israeli authorities' restrictions on water and fuel and cutting off electricity have continued for a year despite knowledge of the impact that these actions have had on health and life, that Israeli authorities flouted multiple ICJ orders, including with respect to the provision of water, fuel, electricity, and aid, and that after a year, most of the Palestinian population remains in Gaza, demonstrating that Israeli authorities know that their policies will directly harm them. Genocidal intent may be inferred, is the key part here, may be inferred from this pattern of conduct, together with the statements suggesting some officials wish to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza, and therefore these acts may amount to the crime of genocide. This is the thing. This is I guess the part that I don't like about this report. When you read everything that we have read from the beginning, can you really say that there's any other reasonable inference, to use the ICJ standard, that what they intended through the cutting of water, which is something that you cannot differentiate between military and civilian use, was to destroy that group as such, that if you don't give water to people, they will stop existing as that group? Is it really that difficult to make that jump into that intent? Because what is happening here is that what Human Rights Watch is saying, therefore, is that they have found evidence that the crime against humanity of extermination has been committed. That exists. That is what's happening 100%. They also believe that there is an act of genocide happening under the understanding that one of the actus reus of genocide is being committed. That's what they mean by act of genocide. But they cannot say for sure whether genocidal intent exists. That genocidal intent may be inferred, may exist. And therefore, if you count the genocidal act that you know is happening, and you couple it with a genocidal intent that may be happening, you may get the crime of genocide. That's what's happening in this report. And from what we have read together, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that Human Rights Watch has done a great job in explaining why the only reasonable inference for what Israel is doing is the destruction of a significant part of the population of Palestinians. It has also done a great job in showing that when Israeli officials talk about the deprivation of water, they talk about the deprivation of water in genocidal terms, explicitly, not even inferring, explicitly talking about genocidal intent. And yet, when it comes to saying, is genocide happening? They say, yeah, it may be happening. So, let me put it this way. It is good that Human Rights Watch is saying that genocide may be happening. But I think we are way past that. Like, genocide may be happening is something that scholars of genocide got together and said there's a risk of genocide in Gaza all the way back in, like, I think it was like November 2023. Right? So this is a conclusion that I feel is lacking one more paragraph of saying, no, actually, from what we have read, we have read this together, right? From what we have read, there is such intent. We can infer this intent. We can read that intent in the statements expressly. And the advantage of focusing on deprivation of water is that you don't really need to look at all the statements by Israeli leaders, just the ones related to cutting off water, and those are pretty damning. So why may is what I don't understand. Why may be the crime of genocide? It's it feels too safe. It feels too cautious. When you have the data, you have the argument there made. I don't understand. I wish that they had trusted the research and concluded that there is intent to destroy, and therefore the genocidal act, coupled with the genocidal intent that they have found, means that there is genocide. But because they cannot jump into the genocidal intent pool, then in their conclusions, where are the conclusions? Oh, they're in the beginning, right? Hold on. No? Where is it? Where am I? Hold on. Let me find the conclusion so that you see what I'm talking about. It should be around here. Where is it? Wow, it's a very big summary. Okay, violations of international law. Here we are. Okay, here it is. It says, Human Rights Watch concludes that Israeli authorities have over the past year intentionally inflicted on the Palestinian population in Gaza conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. This policy inflicted as part of a mass killing of Palestinian civilians in Gaza means Israeli authorities have committed the crime against humanity of extermination, which is ongoing. This policy also amounts to an act of genocide under the Genocide Convention of 1948. This is a poor framing. Because remember that Bill Clinton conference that I was talking about with Rwanda? In that press conference, when Bill Clinton said, these are acts of genocide, he meant these are isolated, specific instances of genocide, actual genocide, right? With intent. It's just not a general genocide. That was bad. That was the bad framing for Rwanda. Of course, we know that now, and we knew that back then. But when he was talking about acts of genocide, he was not saying people are committing, or I hope he wasn't at least, people are committing the type of conduct that leads to genocide, but they're not actually committing genocide at all. Which is, I feel like, what is happening here. What Human Rights Watch seems to be saying is people are committing one of the type of acts that can be genocide if coupled with intent. But I don't know if there is intent. Right? So the crime of genocide requires act of genocide be committed with genocidal intent. The pattern of conduct set out in this report, together with statements suggesting some Israeli officials wish to destroy Palestinians in Gaza, may indicate such intent. Right? So when they say act of genocide, people are reporting this as saying that Human Rights Watch has found that there is a genocide, because when you go read the cover, it says extermination and acts of genocide. You sort of get the feeling that what Human Rights Watch is saying is there's extermination and there's genocide. But what they are saying really in the title is there is extermination. There may be genocide. Why? Because one of the acts of genocide, one of the types of conduct that you can do when you commit a genocide is being committed. And if you couple that with the intent that may exist, but I'm not telling you if it does, then there will be a genocide. So if you do the thinking, this report can be entitled Extermination and Genocide. But because we are just saying it may exist, we cannot say extermination and genocide. We need to say extermination and acts of genocide. Because we haven't found that there is genocide. We have found that there may be a genocide because we have the actus reus, but we're not sure if we have the intent. At this point, after a year, after Amnesty's report, after Air Wars report, after the committee, the Inquiry Commission for Palestine's report, after Francesca Albanese's 2 reports, it feels like you guys are late to the party. This was a determination that we could have made a long time ago. And that's a pity, because this is a good report. It is well written. It is well done. I think it proves its case. I think this report should have been called Extermination and Genocide, not Extermination and Acts of Genocide. I think the evidence is there. They have proven it. We've read it together. They have proven it. What else What other reasonable inference is there for the cutting of water born on the evidence that it is not that they are cutting water because they're launching a military operation for 15 days, and so they're cutting water for 15 days so that Hamas doesn't have access to water, and then they reconnect the water. No, they are cutting it, they are destroying the infrastructure, and then they are preventing them from repairing it, blankets style. What other reasonable inference, other than genocidal intent, other than the intent to destroy part of the Palestinian population through starvation, through dehydration, can you get from that evidence? What is the other reasonable inference? I don't know. I don't know what is the other reasonable inference. I don't understand what the other reasonable inference is of this analysis. I think this report is excellent in showing that that is the only reasonable inference. In very clear terms, we don't even need to get to the conclusion of, oh, is the objective of cutting water defeating Hamas? Like, no, right? There's no connection between the two. What is the military advantage of cutting water to the entire population? Like, Hamas did not die of dehydration in a year. It didn't die of dehydration in 6 months. So clearly the strategy is not working. So you are punishing the civilian population and not achieving your results for Hamas, your supposed results. So born out of the evidence, the reasonable inference is that there's intent. And yet Human Rights Watch doesn't say that. But yet it still puts the word genocide in its cover. And it shouldn't, honestly. If you're not going to say extermination and genocide, then don't put the word genocide in the title. Because what you're saying is extermination and maybe genocide. That's the real title of this report. Extermination and maybe genocide. And it's not true. That is not the content of this report. The content of this report is extermination and genocide. But I don't know why. I don't understand why they did not trust the research enough to say extermination and genocide. That's my frustration with this report. That's my frustration. It is very valuable that they have done this research. It is a good report. It is very valuable that they say that this may amount to genocide. It is very valuable that they say that there is extermination. But it would have been perfect if they had said extermination and genocide, because there is intent, because there's no other reasonable inference for cutting off water. It's there. It's in the text. It's in the report. That's my frustration. That's my that's why I find the Amnesty report not only broader, but also, I guess, more useful in terms of like where we are at right now in the face of a year of genocide. I could have told you that there is an act of genocide or maybe intent months ago. Right? That's my frustration. And I say this with a lot of love for Human Rights Watch. Like I said, I really I hope that they have more reports coming. It's my constructive criticism from someone who really likes them and wishes their mission to succeed. Yeah. Let me go to the chat. Oh, you were talking a lot. That all sounds so compelling that it is inexplicable to me how countries like Austria and Germany, given their dark past, can actively support Israel. Yeah, at this point they have a legal obligation not to support what Israel is doing in Gaza, actually. Yeah, so yeah. There's another statement by Barbok from earlier today. It's very absurd. Oh God. I'm very scared. Oh, it's in German. Yeah, it's in German. Sorry, Jens. But yeah, I share that disbelief. Marshall Sukov says, have the Israelis even attempted to prop up, let's say, a drinking water system in Gaza? So Kogat says they have. Let me see if I can put Kogat here. Kogat. Uh-oh, what's this? Hold on. Let me find you, Kogat. So let me put Koga on the screen. Hold on. Okay, that's Koga. So Kogat says here. Enough with the baseless accusations. Millions of liters of water flow into the Gaza Strip through 3 Israeli water pipelines. Israel also facilitated hundreds of water infrastructure repairs and fixed water lines leading to Gaza on the Israeli side that were damaged by Hamas. Some of these repairs were done under fire. Suggesting otherwise ignores reality and continues Human Rights Watch's history of doing anything they can, including ignoring the actions of Hamas terror, to demonize Israel. And then there's Claudio Francavilla, who's the EU advocacy for Human Rights Watch, saying, enough of your genocidal acts and with your BS. This is how much water Palestinians in Gaza get. IDF has destroyed vital water infrastructure and equipment and killed people trying to fix it, with devastating impact on people and on what's left of the healthcare system. So, see, I'm telling you, these are good people, man. Says Kogat humanitarian assessment team monitors the humanitarian situation across Gaza in all areas, including water from a wide range of sources, current water availability from water lines from Israel, water desalination plants, and pumping facilities. 107 liters of water per person per day in northern Gaza, 34 liters per person per day in central Gaza, and 20 liters per person per day in southern Gaza, which is not enough, right? Here you go. A recent report claims Israel deliberately used water as a weapon of war. This libelous claim is an egregious lie. Here's why. 3 water lines from Israel are active, supplying an average of 107 liters per person in northern Gaza. Blah, blah, we saw this. Israel facilitated hundreds of water infrastructure repairs, both in northern and southern Gaza. Israel also fixed water lines leading to Gaza on the Israeli side that were damaged by Hamas. Some of these repairs were done under fire. Israel facilitated the repair of the Kela electricity line. So the desalination plant in Khan Yunis can work at full capacity. We coordinated the refueling of water pumping facilities on a continued basis. Water also enters Israel on humanitarian aid trucks. We operate in accordance with international law, saying otherwise is just flagrant deceit. So this is similar to the water argument, to the food argument. With Kogat saying we actually do send a lot of food into Gaza, and then the U.S. itself saying actually you don't. So again, I take this with a very big grain of salt. So the Israelis could counter that they are simply indifferent to the right of life of Palestinians. So there's no genocidal intent in the state, only in some ministers. But I mean, the ministers are the state, right? So Israel doesn't exist as a separate consciousness. And also, like, I guess here's where I probably am in the minority here. But I think if you're indifferent to life, then you are. I mean, if you're indifferent to life and you create conditions of life or conditions where life cannot exist, then you are sort of like voluntarily intending that life to end. I don't care if you morally care for the value of that life or not. If you intend for that life to exist in a situation where conditions cannot sustain life, I don't care if you value the life or not, you're still ending it. Highland Cherenkov says the conclusion in the beginning straight to jail. No, they do that for strategic reasons. Actually, many NGOs do this. They put the conclusion in the beginning because they want people to read the executive summary and the conclusions, and then most people don't do what we just did, which is read the actual freaking report. Sif says I'm not sleeping, but I'm running Hades runs. Is that bad? It's fine. It's fine. So the UNGA has today adopted a resolution requesting an ICJ advisory opinion on humanitarian and other assistance to the Gaza Strip. Perhaps this will become the next report. Sure, but at the same time, the problem with that is um, it's gonna take time, and so in a way, I think it's enough with what we have. Right? Um, Jens says it's just abject cowardice. It's not like the previous advisory opinions were not abundantly clear. Exactly. And states would still need to actually adopt measures after that new AO. Measures they could adopt now. The ICJ is not supposed to be the place for states to offload abundantly clear treaty obligations to. Yeah, exactly. Like, I think we have enough information right now to get states to not collaborate with Israel. It feels like like deflecting a little bit and saying like, well, when the ICJ says that we don't need to collaborate with you, we won't. And they already did say it. They said it in the previous advisory opinion. But yeah, okay. So this is basically this is my runoff of the Human Rights Watch report, and why. While I think it's very well done, while I think it's very useful as a collection of evidence, and while I applaud Human Rights Watch for making this report, I also feel like they should have believed in their own research more and take that extra jump and say that this was actual intent to destroy and therefore genocide, and that the title of their report should be Extermination and Genocide, not Extermination and Acts of Genocide, because act of genocide conveys to the general population that there is a genocide happening, that like the report will be, oh, Human Rights Watch is saying that Israel is committing genocide, when in reality it isn't. It's not really saying that Israel is committing genocide. It is saying that Israel may be committing genocide, and that's a big difference. So putting genocide in the title, the word genocide in the title, when you have not actually concluded that there is a genocide, is at the very least a little misleading. So yeah, that's my that's how I see this report. Um, it could have been perfect. It will have to remain as very good.